it works. You start on the unsure, start in the middle, just for the sake of the game.
Okay.
And then you'll talk. You don't have to argue with each other per se, but you just give your reasons as to why you think it. And then I'll ask you about that. So abortion is murder is the statement that you need to pick a spot. Strongly agree slightly, and vice versa all the way to the other side.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, you got to pick a line, and you're allowed to move if you hear something that would persuade you, or certainly if you think of something. So, all right, ready?
Yep.
Take your spot in 3, 2, 1, go. Oh, great. Opposing, almost completely opposing. Got to pick a line though, Jack. Strongly or okay? Disagree, strongly agree. Okay, let's start with Jack. Why do you disagree that abortion is murder?
I mean, at least for me, like, in my opinion, like, I really don't even think like abortion is murder is the right question to be asking when talking about abortion.
Nope, sorry.
I personally believe that the question should be about women's autonomy, because I believe that once you take away somebody's autonomy, you are essentially dehumanizing. So I don't believe that the abortion debate is about whether or not a fetus is viable or not. Honestly, it could be viable. It could not, it could be a person. It could not be.
Okay.
The question is whether or not we should be able to control women's bodies.
Okay.
At least for me, an analogy that I kind of like to think of is like, imagine if somebody like kidnapped you for like 9 months, hooked you up to kidney dialysis for some other guy, and if you can leave at any time, but if you were to leave, that person will die. So that's the kind of, like, it shouldn't really be it really shouldn't be a question about whether or not the fetus itself is alive or human or not. It should be whether or not you should have the choice to do what you want with your body. That's honestly. But if I had to answer the question, if it is, I don't believe that for most of fetal development that it meets really personhood. That's kind of how I
doesn't meet personhood.
Yeah, I don't view, I do kind of see that if I had to say it, it is mostly just kind of a clump of cells.
Okay.
I mean, it is solely, it's more of a parasite than it is a human being. It's just kind of callous to say, but when you kind of look at it, at least from what I see, that's how I view it.
Okay, all right. We'll come back to that. There's a bunch of issues there. Sorry, remind me your name again.
Sam.
Sam. What do you think? Why do you strongly agree abortion is murder? And then you can respond to Jack.
All right. Well, the way I see it is that a baby inside the womb and a baby outside the womb is the same. The genetic makeup of the baby does not change right after it's born. It is the same all the way through. It has the same genes. So the difference before and after it's born, there is no difference. It is the same being. It is the same genetic makeup.
Okay.
And I've heard arguments saying, well, what about rape? Well, okay. The amount of rape cases that end up in abortion are so minimal that you're turning the exception into the standard. Not all abortions are rape, not even most of them. A very small fraction of them are rape. So that's the exception, not the standard.
So, well, I was just going to say, you can finish. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And then, furthermore, for what he said, that it is more of a parasite than a human being, to say that a parasite is a human being, or the baby was a parasite, but being the same genetic makeup before and after birth, you're just saying that all people are parasites, and I don't believe that I'm a parasite. I don't believe that you're a parasite. I don't believe he's a parasite. Even though we disagree, I respect your decision and I respect your thoughts, but I don't believe that any people are parasites, because to become all of a sudden from a parasite to a baby and all of a sudden have inherent value it's just false. Like, you can't just say that all of a sudden now the baby has value because it was born. The baby always had value.
Okay. Well, yeah, okay, so it's interesting. So that, Jack, you had said a bunch of things that I, if possible, we'll touch on, but obviously the difference there is that he thinks the nature of the thing biologically doesn't ever change. I think you say after the moment of conception or early on, or maybe you would say that.
Like,
from the earliest moments, the DNA makeup of the organism stays essentially the same. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. What do you think of that, Jack? So that gets to the issue of what it is, which you touched at the end.
Yeah, and so, well, like I kind of said, I mean, to me, like, it really doesn't matter whether the fetus is alive or not. That really is kind of like my view. To me, the question should be about women's autonomy, because it's a question on whether or not the ends justify the means for me when it comes to the abortion topic. And I really don't think that they do. But to address some of the things that he said...
can I ask specifically, keep that thought for just a second, but so would you agree that from the earliest moments, let's say after reproduction starts, the organism that we're talking about is a human organism, the DNA makeup is more or less stays the same, essentially for their whole life, but up until birth and after birth? Would you agree with that basic statement?
I mean, the DNA might be the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a journalism major. I'm not,
Sure.
preaching.
Let's just grant it for the sake of argument.
Yeah.
How about that?
So yeah, no, it could. We could. For the sake of argument, we can 100% say that.
Okay.
It is. But to address some of the things that, like, you kind of said, like the rape thing, like, saying that just because it's minimal doesn't make it not have. It's like saying oh, well, gay people make up such a small percentage of the United States population. Why do we have media that caters to them? It's because they're human beings. It's because they do exist and they should have a voice in society. So when it comes to things like the rape thing, that is something that needs to be talked about, because it does happen. And and I feel like when you say it like, oh, well, it's such a minute time, you're almost it almost feels like you're trying to talk it away, like it doesn't exist in the first place. That's just kind of one thing that I kind of think of when I hear that.
Yeah. So for instance, and I want to, if you have thoughts on that, if the issue of gay rights, for instance, as you mentioned, the fact that they're human beings, is that determination about them being human essentially a biological reality? They're humans. They're not a frog, right? The biological difference is really significant. We don't really care about a frog's sexual preferences, right? But we care about, in our society, generally speaking, humans' sexual preferences. They should be protected. All the rest, that's a different topic. But does that biological? Are you believing that the biological distinction there matters? You see where I'm going with that?
Kind of. I don't necessarily think it's up to biology. I think it's like I said, it's not a question of biology. It's a question of autonomy. It's more a question on it's a women's rights question. It's not a in just looking at kind of like the history of abortion, like pro-life, like a majority of Americans and just people in general have been pro-choice for throughout history. I mean, the pro-life movement really didn't start until 1965 after the Civil War, because to limit who white women can breed with. It was a really disgusting origins of the pro-life movement, at least in the United States. And so the pro-life argument really came about in the 70s with the with the party switch. And so just kind of looking at the history of it in itself, most people have understood throughout history that abortion is not murder. Nobody, people have not seen it as murder. So I don't think it ever has been a question about biology or genetics or DNA, but it's always been a question on whether or not women can do what they want with their bodies.
Okay, I want to come back to you on that. What do you think about his argument there about women's autonomy? So obviously, Jack is making a very strong statement that it has nothing to do, I think you would say, right, Jack, with whether it's a human being, but whether there's some kind of infringement on a woman's ability to do what she wants. What would you say in response to that? Or what do you think of that? Does that persuade you?
I feel like there should be no thought to women's rights, and they 100% should not be able to do what they want if it is the cost of a human life. Because you agreed that the DNA is the same, resulting in the conclusion that it is a human being, meaning you're advocating for murder, and that women's rights are more important than a child's life.
So that does get to the crux of the matter, I think, at least part of it, Jack, is that you're saying, so how about, if I can apply that for a second, what if you have so you're saying a woman's autonomy is the defining issue, right?
It is about.
When does that begin? How about a week after birth? She's really, really limited. Trust me, I have some kids. Having a newborn is extremely detrimental to one's autonomy, if you will. And she's sick of that. She's going to choose her autonomy as the most important thing. She's going to kill that baby. Is that okay?
Well, I mean, once again, it's less about killing babies. I mean, we could say that even if it is a baby. I mean, once again.
Well, it's right there. It's crying, right? It's got its passy. She's sick of it.
And sure, I do just want to ask him a question. So, going back to kind of like the analogy that I brought up in the beginning, if let's say the government kidnapped you and forced you to provide kidney dialysis to some guy, you're able to leave at any time, but your life is essentially changed forever because of the situation. Do you leave?
Okay.
That is how I see it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very much of like, it's about state. It's whether or not the state can control a woman's bodies. It is about state-enforced pregnancy. That is what it's. That's
So-
what the crux of the argument.
That's an interesting question. Someone else just asked it too. I'll come back and let you answer. But I'm also curious. So if it is about state, the control of a woman's body, and you have a newborn baby, 2 weeks old,
Yeah.
what do you think? So if it is about all autonomy, is she free to kill that baby? Because it's
Okay. I guess I misunderstood. I thought you were talking
Oh.
like a week after conception when you first.
no. Week after birth. After birth.
So after
baby's
birth,
crying.
Well, in that case, when the baby is outside the mother, then
Yeah.
it has autonomy. When it's inside, so like imagine if a grown man crawled inside you. You have the decision. You should be able to decide.
I don't want to imagine that, man.
I mean, I understand. I don't blame you, but just for the sake of argument,
Okay.
if that were to somehow conceivably happen, if something were to crawl inside me, a human being,
Yeah.
I don't know what I would do in that situation, but I feel like I should be able to take care of it any way that I see fit. When it comes to when the baby is actually outside, then the baby has its own autonomy.
Well, what do you mean by that? How does it have autonomy?
Well, it might not be able to do everything that you and I can. It can still do things on its own. It might not be able to do everything. It might not be able to sustain itself on its own, but it can make decisions. It's not solely dependent on the mother.
Well, what if I argued to you, just for the sake of argument?
Yeah, absolutely.
What if I argued to, I would disagree and say that baby is virtually dependent in almost every single regard that it was 2 weeks prior. I've had some babies, not myself, but and they are, let's just say they have they don't really make decisions per se. But even if you go with that, with your argument there, what is the difference between, let's just say, the moment after birth versus the moment before? 10 minutes on either side. Yeah. You're saying that it's about the woman's autonomy, and I'm curious if you have thoughts on this too, in response to that. But what changes afterwards?
I mean, the baby is outside the mother. It's no
Outside.
longer inside.
Okay.
It no longer affects the woman's bodily autonomy. It goes from it being about bodily autonomy and actually being about yourself to being about responsibility. That's the difference between actually having the kid and then not wanting it after you have the kid, and it being a part of like your body and you not being able to have control over what you want to do with it.
Okay.
So that's kind of the distinction that I have.
Okay, I'll come back possibly. You have thoughts in response to that? Okay. This is too long of a situation. No, I mean the space between the, they need to be shorter.
Well, I would argue that once the baby is birthed and outside the mother, it's an even greater responsibility towards the mother, and an even when it's inside of you, the mother doesn't really have to do anything besides just carry the baby. And of course that's hard because, you're pregnant, your body's going through all sorts of changes to prepare for a birth, and you're just using more energy and stuff and all that. But once the baby's birthed, then you have to voluntarily care for it. You have to feed it, you have to give it water, you have to put it to bed, you have to take care of it.
You don't give them water, by the way. Don't give babies water.
Give them milk. Or like when it gets older, it can drink water.
Yeah.
Okay, so you give it whatever it needs, and it's going to cry and it's going to annoy you, and you won't get sleep. Are you a dad?
I am.
Yeah, so you probably experienced this.
I sleep less than I used to. Let's put it that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's seemingly more reasons after the baby's birthed to get rid of it, because it's a bigger annoyance, bigger responsibilities.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but why do people not do that? It's unnatural. It's unnatural to just kill the baby after its birth. Because if everything was about yourself, and if everything was about, what makes more sense for me, people would not be on this earth right now because nobody would have babies, because it's a big responsibility and it's a big hassle. I mean, me right now, I'm 18. I was just a kid, you know. I wouldn't want to have kids right now because it's a big responsibility. Now, maybe at one time I choose to, but it's not because I think it'll be easier and I think it'll make my life better. It's because there's a natural process in which God set in place for people to be on this earth and to have kids and to multiply and to rule the earth.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to set aside your preferences, because I don't think anybody wants to be woken up in the middle of the night 4 or 5 times because of their kid.
Yeah.
Everybody would want more sleep, and everybody, like, it's not cheap to have kids.
No.
I'm sure you could agree with that.
It's the most expensive ever in America, apparently, right now.
So
$300,000 or something.
So when you're having these kids, people set that aside. Now, if everything was about just making it easier and stuff,
Sure.
nobody would have kids ever, and everybody would be dead because nobody would reproduce.
Well, what do you think of that, Jack? Because that is an interesting point. If it's about bodily autonomy, there's, I would venture to say, a lot of moms who would agree with that statement, that once the baby is born, it's actually significantly more difficult in many regards. Not that plenty of moms have really hard pregnancies, but you could argue I think that's a good point, that after birth, responsibilities actually increase. You got to do this, you got to do that. You don't sleep a lot sometimes, that kind of stuff. What do you think of that? Because that challenges your autonomy thing and whether or not you can end that child's life. It seems to me anyways. So let's say, just if I can make a question for you. If the distinction of why you can kill, if I can use that word, you can end a baby's life, is autonomy, then what happens if in fact her autonomy is even less after birth? Her autonomy is now extremely limited, as opposed to prior was, let's just say, in many cases, even she was more free to go about and do what she wants.
Well, I mean, actually, in that case, I don't believe that you're using the word autonomy correctly. Like I said,
Okay.
Autonomy is about like what, when people talk about bodily autonomy and they say my body, my choice, it's about this. It's about what you can do to this. If I want to get, 15 nose piercings, I can do that because it's my body. You can apply that argument to drugs. People want to, smoke weed or do whatever they want. That is their autonomy. They are ingesting that, and it is affecting them. When it comes to when the baby is actually born, when it's outside, it goes from being autonomy to what I would consider responsibility. It is hard. It is extremely hard. Nobody's ever going to, but just talking about like responsibility and stuff like that, like we're all here on a college campus. College isn't easy, but we still decide to do it because we want to. Because, so saying that, just because parenthood isn't easy, nobody would ever do it. Granted, the birth rate has been going down, but there's a lot of socioeconomic reasons for that. It's just harder. People are working longer hours. So if you want to talk about like why that is, it's not because of abortion. It's because people just can't afford to have kids anymore, which is a shame. So that's at least, what I would kind of say is that, in the use of autonomy in there it's just incorrect because, yeah.
So it seems like you have something in your mind that happens at birth that changes it from a woman's ability to do as she pleases, whether it's piercings or is, takes that baby out of her womb, if I can try and be a little neutral about that language there.
You can
kill the baby, if you want to say.
Like I said, it literally, to me, the abortion argument isn't whether or not the baby is alive or dead. You can say kill, you can say remove. To me, I really don't think that is the argument. I don't think that's what we should be talking about. It's about whether or not the ends justify the means. It's about whether or not violating and dehumanizing a woman justifies the end of doing whatever, whether it be exterminating an embryo or just killing a baby. That's what it is about. It's about whether or not the ends justify the means.
Okay. Any thoughts to that? Okay. And we could, we won't go all day, but we'll figure out an end point at some point.
Okay. Well, just trying to process.
Yeah, that's all right. It's important to process. Take your time.
Yeah.
That really matters.
Well, saying that a woman has autonomy, she can, decide what she wants to do with her own body and all that. And I completely agree that a woman can do whatever she wants with her own body because it is her body, and to some extent it is her choice. But to kill a baby is sacrificing something else's autonomy for your own. So I don't like, why should one person's rights be above another's? That's the whole point of the Constitution, is you have rights and you can do whatever you want with your rights. But once those rights violate other people's rights and it causes them to have less rights, then that's when your rights end. That's where the line is drawn in America. Is
Okay.
when my rights violate your rights.
Yeah.
Like I can do what I want, but if I hurt you
Yeah.
and I make it harder for you, then that's where the line is drawn, and I get in trouble for that. So you can do what you want for your body, but when you violate someone else's rights and murder a child, why should you be able to continue with that?
Here's if I can summarize that,
Yeah.
Jack, and I'm curious your thoughts. And one way I would put that is to say, I agree with a fair bit of what you're saying on aspects of that, Jack. But what if I can say, the bodily autonomy, the body inside her body, in other words, if you will, isn't her body, right? So the growing child is a different body. What about that body's protection under the law, let's say, or just in general?
Well, yeah, I mean, that is a fair thing to bring up. Like, yeah, well, if it is, if we both can, for the sake of argument, say that is a person, then yeah, that is a fair question. But it's still, that body, the woman's bodily autonomy is what is being the most affected by the pregnancy. It's the baby has entered the woman. Okay, so it is being affected in that way. Once again, going to that analogy, I don't think anybody should die, going back to the analogy of, kidney dialysis and stuff like that. I mean, it's a situation where it's going to, can potentially ruin your life. It's going to derail everything. And if you, stay in whatever bunker you're being kept in with, hooked up to tubes, getting the life sucked out of you for however long with the potential that you die, which is the thing that happens in pregnancies. We haven't even touched on ectopic pregnancies, which directly affect the woman. Then it really is just about, you are the one being forced into this situation. Well,
what would you say to the fact that most of the time it's not being forced? It's in fact a result of a choice of sex.
Well, I mean...
Yeah, I don't know if that was this conversation.
Okay,
wasn't
well,
it?
yeah.
Rape is extremely low reason
Yeah.
for abortion, like less than 1%
Yes,
or something.
correct,
let's say.
but, we can also say that...
Does that factor into the analogy for you, though? Like, if I get stolen and hooked up to a dialysis machine, that is interesting in one thing.
Okay, yeah, but if you they offer you a certain amount of money and then you do it and then you regret the decision later on, you should still have this choice to leave. And also, when you say like, oh, well, what about people that actually, have sex, they don't have sex, without a condom, or the condom breaks, or birth control doesn't work, or whatever,
Yeah.
that ventures into victim blaming, in my opinion, where it's like, well, you made the choice. Well, it's like, no, I didn't. I made the choice to have sex. I didn't have the choice to have a baby. That's why I'm, trying to do, birth, like either the Plan B or going to Planned Parenthood. That's my choice.
Sorry?
Whether or not.
I'll talk when
When,
Oh, okay.
When two people go into sex normally, do they know that a child could be an outcome of their sex?
Well, yeah, sure.
Well, one thing, I want to come back, we'll come back to that possibly. Good question. I want to come back to the thing, just resting here for just a second, Jack, with the question, because you had mentioned it was an important point, that we're dealing with a different body. So you say bodily autonomy, you can get your nose pierced and whatnot, what you want to do. What about the fact, let's say, that in fact, I think you agreed earlier, it is a different body. You're talking about two bodies. One is here and one is inside. What then?
Well, you could say that it's two bodies. And like I said, if it's something that is infecting another person, then in that case, that's
Are you aware of research that shows that embryos are not in fact parasitic in nature?
To me, that's I've been talking here a while, and to me,
Yeah.
that's beside the point. I genuinely think that the question, is abortion murder, completely misses the topic of talking about abortion completely. I believe that it is solely about whether or not women have the right to, whether or not we can control women and their bodies. That is up to me. We can say that it is a baby. We can say it's not a baby. To me, that question is irrelevant. To me, it's about whether or not violating the autonomy of a woman and dehumanizing women is is worth justifying the ends. Do
What-
the
when
ends
you-
justify
The
the
question,
means?
is it a baby, is relevant.
Is it a baby is relevant?
Because when you define whether it is a baby or not, you define whether a woman's autonomy violates the autonomy of the baby inside.
Sure, that's
If that is a baby, then it does violate the autonomy. If it is not, there is no autonomy violated. So it is a relevant question.
so.
And,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
okay.
That's right.
Sorry.
So no, that's all right. It's okay. It's a big topic. So that does bring it right back to that, I think, Jack. If I can, is question.
Yeah.
So you're dealing with
we're
two
talking-
bodies.
Yeah. So
if we're dealing with
so
autonomy,
if we do say, it's two bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, like, one person is being thrown into that situation. They've experienced a lot of hard. I'm sorry. I'm dehydrated. And I'm kind of blanking on.
it's hot and it's
hot.
it's all right.
I'm
That's all right.
I'm kind of getting scattered.
No one's stay together. There's some water from a stranger's bottle. That's all right. Oh yeah. Well, we can wrap up.
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
think.
Yeah, well, I mean,
well, here's a question. Let's end this way,
'cause-
if I can.
'cause
Yeah,
What would?
say something after he's done.
Yes. What would persuade you to at least consider, if not change your mind some? You don't have to go all the way to strongly agree, but is there anything that would persuade you? That topic especially seems extremely relevant to the topic of, if we're talking about bodily autonomy, whose body? So thinking about that, or just anything else, would there be something that would, in fact, you would find persuasive that would push you that direction or that one? Obviously,
Well,
that one.
I mean, in terms of the question, is abortion murder? I mean, sure, you might be able to persuade me on whether or not it's a baby, but if you're going to try and persuade me on whether or not, it is a women's rights issue or not, then the answer is no, because it absolutely is.
So would you say, if I can put a point on it, and then maybe I'll let you, what are you going to say, that a woman is allowed, if you say, if you're persuaded it's in fact another body, which most people would agree with, but let's just say if, that a woman has absolute right to end that child's life at any point in pregnancy, or would you say something slightly different than that? Is she absolute control, absolute decision making up into the moment of birth or after, or what would you say?
I would say, yeah, that absolutely. While it's
All of it?
While it's still affecting her autonomy, she has the choice.
Okay. Afterwards too?
Afterwards, she does not get it because it is no longer a part of her autonomy. It just, comes down to responsibility.
Well, we did talk about that earlier.
So it does affect her. Things can affect you, but that doesn't mean it infects, affects your bodily autonomy. Let's talk about, cigarettes as an example, just real quick. You can smoke as many cigarettes as you want. That hurts your own body. But secondhand smoke, that causes cancer. That affects other people.
Sure.
So, we can talk about like that kind of, you can smoke as many, packs as you want.
Yeah.
But affecting other people, then that is, when the baby is outside the womb, then you're directly affecting that.
Breastfeeding also changes the woman's autonomy.
Okay, well, we did talk about that. You wanted to say something, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah.
You got class,
Well,
Jack, I think.
He repeatedly said that the woman is thrown into this situation. Now, putting aside rape examples, because they are an exception and not the standard in many cases. Thank you. And so the woman is not thrown into the situation. She had sex. She knew the risks. Even with condoms and birth control, there is still a possibility you can't have babies. So then, if you 100% want to be sure, there is one way to be sure: do not have sex. When you are having sex, you are signing up for the repercussions that come along with it. If I walked over to you right now, or anyone here, and I just punched them in the face, everybody would be like, whoa, 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 back up, back up, back up. And the cops would be called on me, and I'd probably be hauled off to jail, and I'd probably get a court date for assault, okay? I would know the repercussions of such an action.
Sure, the
so
possible one.
So that's why I don't do it.
Sure.
I know that there's a possibility I could impregnate a woman by having sex. That is why I don't do it.
Well, that does get to your point earlier, Jack, with the word responsibility. Obviously, that is relevant in the realm of pregnancy. If you know that pregnancy is a result of sex, or the possible result of sex, obviously, then of course that does get into the issue of your responsibility starts, let's say, before that moment of birth, as instead of autonomy. His point is to say responsibility actually starts at the moment of the only act, in fact, that ever produces new human life, which is sexual intercourse. So that is, any final thoughts? We need to kind of wrap up, I think, because you said you got to get to class.
that to me is the but what was she wearing sort of argument. That's victim blaming to me.
Well, does she, let's just say this, so that may or may not be what he means, but does she have any responsibility, let's say, to take responsibility for her actions, including sex? She's aware, if I go in to this situation, I have sex, I could get pregnant. Would you say, and you're not saying, oh, she deserves it, or she was dressed really provocatively.
Well,
It's not that.
I know. And I'm not trying to be inflammatory, but that to me, it really does sound like victim blaming. Like, I mean, people, they might be getting that situation, and it might not be an intent, but I mean, it's.
Well, just to the point though, if I can just point a tiny bit.
Sorry, I'm
does she have? The question: does she have any responsibility, whatever? So let's just say, for the sake of argument, he's not blaming her. He's simply saying she's aware and making a choice. Not saying she deserved it or she got raped because she was dressed this way. Not that, but she has.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, like, even in that argument, it's she deserved to get raped or whatever. It's still just like you could have prevented it. And once again, I mean, people are people, and so you need to acknowledge that people are people. And even so, I mean. Okay, the question is whether or not she has responsibility to prevent that situation from happening. And in that case, I would probably say, I mean, it's up to her. I would probably say, not really. If I had to.
She doesn't have responsibility in the production of that human life.
No.
Huh, okay. Any thoughts on that? All right. And maybe last word. If you got 2 minutes? You got 2 minutes?
No, I got it till 2. I'm just like, heat.
Oh, yeah. These clouds are helping. These are a welcome.
Well, I'd like to say, when a woman says, my body, my choice, I think that is 100% true. It is your body. You chose to have sex. That was your choice. Your choice resulted in a baby. You made your choice with your body. So don't go killing somebody because of your choices.
So that's good. That's helpful repetition of your point, I think, of the nature of that responsibility. Jack, you don't think that she bears any responsibility whatever with then that choice?
I mean, at the current moment, I guess not. No.
Okay. My question earlier, would there be anything that would move you this way, or would there be anything move you
like
this way?
In terms of if abortion's murder, sure, maybe. If the question whether or not abortion should be legal or illegal, no, I absolutely think it should.
Wait, what do you say with the question of whether it's murder? What are you saying? That it might be, in fact?
I'm gonna give it a hot I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Because I don't think it matters to the larger issue.
Okay. Would it persuade you to say, let's say this, if I'm trying to summarize the earlier thought, that if you could be shown, in fact, and persuaded to some degree that unborn human life itself is worthy of protection, is an actual human that will, in fact, be making decisions very shortly, that killing it is not right because of the fact that that's what it is, that is a major factor in making that decision. Just showing that it's a human life, to come to your word with autonomy, that it itself is a separate body. You mentioned, my body, my choice. Would that, do you think, possibly push you any?
No.
No? Okay. Well, you two either have any more thoughts? Obviously, the goal is not necessarily to agree in this moment, though of course that's permitted. But I would encourage, obviously, those things. Questioning what would push you towards believing what's true, what's good, what's beautiful, is a really big deal. But okay, well, final thoughts? None?
I think
we've had some thoughts.
I need to say.
Okay, well, we can wrap up.